and gentlemen, this is your cruise director, Tyler. Hope you're out there enjoying another beautiful day on board as we sail these high seas. If you've ever wondered what goes on behind the scenes of a cruise, it's time for you to pull up a stool, grab a drink, and buckle in, because you're about to hear stories that no other guests have heard before. Welcome to the Crew Bar in an episode of Ship-Faced, Confessions of a Drunken Cruise Director and Friends. Let's sail away. Dan the man, hello, sir.
Hello, how are you?
Pretty fantastic. How's your day?
It's a lovely, cloudless day, and it reminds me of so many of those days at sea.
And where is this cloudless day for you?
Beautiful New York City.
Okay. That's kind of where I want to start with you, Danny. Where do we find you?
All right, so you find me here in Harlem, just across the river from Yankee Stadium in the Bronx. I'm sort of in the part of Manhattan, if people are familiar with New York geography, where there stops being an east side and west side, and it just sort of turns into a cone head. That's the part of New York City I'm in. And I've been here off and on, pandemic not included. Like the height of lockdown, I went back to California. But I've been here since 2019.
Okay. Right on. But you spent pandemic back here in California.
I did. I was visiting my girlfriend at happenstance. Nothing was planned. I went out there because we were going to go to spring training for Major League Baseball. And I landed, I think, on March 14th or 15th. And the world shut down on March 16th.
Right.
And I was like, I'm here. Let me just stay here for a couple weeks while this all blows over. This thing should be done in a couple of weeks. And then it turned into, well, we rented a house for a year together. And then, auditions and shows began to reopen a year and a half later. So I sort of just found myself subletting my apartment from afar unexpectedly.
Right on. I was talking to another friend last night just about how where were you March 2020? Almost like the thing,
Yes.
Where were you 9/11? It's got that same, like, damn, we just went through all that.
Where were you?
I was here in LA and had a great roommate here that we made it through the
Thank
pandemic
God.
well without strangling each other or smashing dishes on the wall. So, yeah. But, and stayed as, many times you think, where should I be through all of this? But
Yeah.
stayed here. So what are you doing out there now?
So I am an actor. I moved here because of theatrical opportunities, because stupid things like there are regional theaters in neighboring states, Oregon, Arizona, Nevada, that just don't audition in California. So if you want to work out west, you got to move to New York first to then work out of New York. And so I was like, all right, there's only 3 or 4 regional theaters in the greater Orange County, LA area. And so I was like, well, they have a pool of actors in their stable, so it's time for me to find someplace a little less crowded. So I moved to New York City instead. And it's been wonderful. It's been great. I got my equity card when I came out here. Hey!
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. And I've been doing, some, stuff kind of all over. And then I also teach. I get high schoolers ready for their college auditions.
Okay, right on. Well, let's back this truck up and find out where you grew up. What kind of kid were you? What spurred you to your time on cruise ships? How'd that all go?
So I was born in Southern California and I grew up there. And when I went into college, I went in as an actor and a playwright. And by the time that I graduated as a stage manager. Because I thought, stage management's cool. I like being the guy that the guy goes to. And I like crafting the process from way before the talent gets there, from the way beginning all the way to the very, very end. I really enjoyed that process. And so I said, okay, I guess I'm a stage manager. And so I went to work at a theme park in Southern California and stage managing the Aladdin show at Disney California Adventure. It was a good job for somebody else. I really wanted to be a performer, I realized by the time that I got there. And I was so close to the performers, but not doing it, that I was sort of kind of heartbroken. And I went through a breakup at the same time. So everything, I was batting zeros. So I decided, you know what? Why don't I just move locations and my troubles won't follow me? And so I decided to hop on to Disney Cruise Line. So
Okay.
going from the theme park to the cruise line.
Right. What's that
And
hop process like?
so easy, so incredibly easy.
Really?
Yeah, I called the cruise line and I was like, "Hi, I would like a job. I currently work at the theme park." And they were like, "Do you have a pulse? Are you a stage manager?" Yes.
Come on
Good.
board.
You're hired. Yep. There's a really high turnover, and so when they get someone, I'm certainly not in the top 10 stage managers that I know. But if you have someone who has some professional experience, it certainly beats a lot of the applicants they get who are like, "I want to work on a boat," which is much different.
That sounds cool.
Yeah, right. So they were like, "Yeah, come on board." Then I got on board, and I got to tell you,
How old were you when you started this?
see, I hopped on board January of 2012, so I would have been 29.
Okay.
Yeah. And, before you go on board, for anyone who has never worked on a cruise ship before, you have to do like a safety certification few days where you learn, like, you watch a lot of harrowing videos of people dying on cruise ships.
Yes.
And then by the time you're done, you're like, "I will wear a life vest, not because you
Yes.
tell me to, because I should."
Yes. For my training, oddly, they flew me to London and
Whoa.
went down to Southampton, then up to this other part of London, like an hour and a half away. This trainer there was like almost like the crypt keeper of training for cruise industry. And I showed up like with 2 hours to go in this training, that this entire like a flight to London and a flight back, and I made it for like an hour and a half of this training, which he was just like so excited to show us these. "Did you see the passengers burning?" And I was like, "Yeah, I saw it." He's like, "Did you hear them screaming?" And I was like, "Yes." What the? It was so creepy. And then turns out he was on the ship that I was going to be on like 2 weeks later. That training could have happened there, but like it was an odd, terrifying experience for me.
I wish I had your trainer. He sounds like a hoot.
He's seen some stories.
I had, Huntington Beach conservative boat guy. And, we had a very international team. We had Italians and Croatians and all kinds of folks. And, they were, the Concordia had just happened, like a couple weeks before this.
Right.
And so, he was talking about like, "So here's why we do this, so we don't have a Concordia thing." And he was really hard on the captain, I think very justifiably so, because the captain was the one who left the Concordia to let everyone else drown. And someone else was like, "Well, I don't think it's his fault because, he wants to save himself." And he was like, "Really? You think it's okay for the captain to leave his crew to fend for themselves?"
Good luck, boys.
That's right.
Captain's out.
So then we did the thing where you put on the wetsuit and you jump in the pool. I don't know if you did this.
You got a wetsuit for your training? I know. I'm sitting here like, I got gypped. I got a life vest. You got to jump in a pool.
Yeah. Okay, this is bizarro, and maybe this only happens for Disney because, it's an immersive experience. You put on a full wetsuit that also, imagine a flap on the side of the head of the wetsuit that goes completely over your nose and mouth, leaving pretty much only your eyes exposed. And the trainer says, "I'm going to push you in, and it's going to feel like you're drowning. You're not, but if you've never experienced this, your body doesn't know that you're not drowning." And so you get pushed in, and sure enough, you're like, "I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die." And then you bob, and it still feels like you're drowning because there's water all around your mouth and nose, even though you're up for air. It was certainly the scariest 30 seconds of my life.
Honestly, like what an almost traumatic experience. Like, I can't wait to go Disney bounding as an employee to like get in the pool.
Yeah, he's like Uncle Scar and you're Mufasa. Ah!
Wow. Okay, you had some intense training then. Okay, so you go through the training to be onboarded essentially as an employee.
And so our training was in Costa Mesa, and then we boarded in San Pedro, and we were the only ship there, so it was really easy to get in and out of. Some ports are like, there's 20 cruise ships, and it's a mess, but this was so easy. The first day, with cruise lines, they can't afford to just have people hanging out
Nope.
because everything is a scarce resource. And so they said, my trainer, his name was Jeff. He was like, "Hi, welcome aboard. Tonight, you're going to watch the show. Tomorrow, you're going to watch the show. And then the next night, you're going to call the show, and I'm going to be shadowing you." Hi, I'm Danny. Good to meet you.
Right. Right. It's that intense. Like
Yeah.
you're barely getting to see your cabin. You make your
Yes.
way around it. It's almost like moving to a new city where
It is. It's a new city where you drive on the other side of the road and they accept krona, not dollars. And also, everyone speaks French. Like, you're learning an entirely new way of living
yes,
while you're learning a new job at
totally.
the same time.
I mean, legit, the laws are different out there, and
That's
not
right, because
not just the
you're
maritime laws, but
international.
like the general like ship community guidelines and how to get around and
Yes.
when and
Getting
what.
around
And
is huge. I remember after about a month, after I become comfortable, my cruise director, who was just the coolest dude, he goes, after the first 2 weeks, I didn't think you would make it because you looked like a deer in headlights. And I did, because, you get down on that I-95 and you're like, which way is the mess? Which way is my cabin? Where is the crew office? Let's see, I was just here. I went around in a circle. Wait, that's a guest elevator. That's a crew elevator. Wait, there aren't stairs, and now I'm late
right, and in trouble.
and in trouble. Yeah. The first 2 weeks, which is my training period, which I was very grateful for. That's how long the crossover was. By the end of the 2 weeks, when Jeff left, I didn't think I could do it. I was like, I'm going to quit. I was very close to quitting after training was done.
Was
like,
it a pretty emotional experience, all of that, being out there at sea and
It is. And you don't know anybody. Like, that's the other thing is like, even if you're an extrovert like I am, you don't know anybody. And so you're very lonely in terms of, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know where I am, and I don't know anybody. And then you're expected to thrive. And that's very difficult.
yeah, like how are those first calls to home?
I didn't really call home.
No,
Because
you use a ship card if there's
I never got mine to work.
That's the majority of everybody I've spoken to and experienced. Those damn ship cards don't work.
No, I tried popping in like the SIM card into my cell phone. This is back in 2012, so like you could open your phone and put in a new SIM card and
Yeah.
stuff, and it was like, no comprendo
Yeah.
English.
Like I can remember like finally getting to port of call where I had signal and just
Yeah.
called for a quick update with mom and dad and expect to just be like cheery, like it's going like this. And then I think as soon as my mom or stepdad asked, "How's it going?" my throat just locked because I was like, because you experience everything you just said, and it's thrilling and exciting, and yet
Yeah.
friggin' terrifying with 2 weeks and
Yes.
go get them.
It is, because then once the training period is over, there are no more nets. There's no kid gloves. If you're a performer, guess what? For that moment that you have a solo on stage, you are the show.
Yes.
You are the face of that ship. You are everything entertainment, and no one can do it for you.
Right.
And as a stage manager, I'm taking care of the entire show, and no one else can do it for me. And there are, many people relying on their job on me, because if the show has a mistake, guest entertainment scores go down. And if guest entertainment scores go down, then corporate gets very mad at the cruise director. And so there's a
And
whole
then that
chain starts
continues
with
to
you.
roll right along. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you brought that up about like guest scores and what that actually means. So the behind the scenes of those scorecards and like, hope you had a great week, gang. Wasn't it enjoyable even though we ran into a whatever circumstance?
Okay.
How about those tens?
Yeah.
Begging for those tens, because if those score sheets don't add up to the right tally for all categories, there's some trouble coming.
Yeah. For the captain is in a really unique position. Some captains have to deal with the safety of the crew and transporting goods. Some captains have to deal with the safety of the crew and combat at sea. these captains have to deal with the safety of the crew and entertainment scores. And that's just as important as all the other captain duties. So if the scores are down, the captain has to grill the cruise director and say, you better make people smile more.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me about like when you found your living quarters and what that was like, actual living on board versus your operations.
I was thrilled because I had heard such horror stories about crew quarters. And someone actually said to me, oh, you get the stage manager cabin. And I was like, oh, what does that mean? Because I'd always heard like, it's the size of a closet and you share it with a roommate too. And I walk in, I've probably got 150 square feet and it's a queen bed with no roommates.
Come on.
And I was like, this is great. And I found out
that's the high
later,
life, dude.
I found out later it was some kind of mistake that both the Magic and the Wonder made, that it was made for somebody else in mind, but they'd already made that cabin. And so this was a duplicate, and it was assigned to the stage manager, and they just never fixed it. Hooray!
Wow. I mean, I was just about to challenge that because I was like, wow, the stage manager got that size? They could get just varied on ships, but that makes sense.
Well, and we were 2.5 stripes.
Okay. Interesting.
So we were we weren't quite a senior officer, but we were certainly a higher ranking officer than a performer.
Right. Cool. Now, you mentioned the I-95. What exactly is that again?
The I-95 is the main highway for crew at the bottom of the ship. And it is, so if I'm a crew member and I have to get from the bow, the front of the ship, to the stern, the back of the ship, and I don't want to walk through guest areas, I'm going to go take the elevator down to the lowest deck that's not like engineering or whatever. And that's going to be one main hallway that is very busy, but it's much easier to get through.
And why wouldn't you want to walk through guest areas?
I loved walking through guest areas. I loved it. I know not everyone does, but it is how you get to your cabin if you're crew who live below decks. It's how you get to the crew mess. It's how you get to the officers' mess. It's how you get to the crew bar, the officers' bar, and to the, crew laundry. It's how you get to the crew office. Any services that you might need are all down on the I-95, so you spend a good deal of time down there.
Yes. Did you eat at the crew mess a lot, or did you get...
One time!
I was going to say...
I tried to be a man of the people one time in my first week with my crew. It was like, screw those fancy guys. I'm going to eat with you. And then I had what they were eating, and I was like, I've changed my mind. Back to the officer's mess.
Yeah. Now, when you say your crew, so as the stage manager, you get stage hands and all kinds of... No.
On Disney, there are really two divisions underneath the cruise director. There's the stage manager whose direct reports are the actors. And then there's the technical production manager whose direct reports are lighting, sound, and automation.
Gotcha.
So when I say my crew, I mean the actors.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. Who are, it's difficult for them because a lot of them have to maintain a very healthy lifestyle to keep their strength up because a lot of these guys are lifting girls and girls are lifting guys. And so, when all they have is like cornflakes and rice curry again, like they're challenged with that.
Yeah. But they got privileges to eat in the Lido and dining areas that guests ate, didn't they?
They would occasionally get guest. You had to request it.
Interesting.
You had to say, my family's coming. Can I get permission from me to go to the top deck? And then I'd have to write them a permission slip, sign it, give it to them in case someone senior to me saw them on top deck and said, what are you doing taking a guest spot up here? And then they show them my piece of paper.
Right. What's funny is how this really can vary from, line to line.
Yes.
Cruise industry, where some lines of performers 100% can be in guest areas and it's encouraged and get to dine at the restaurants, to something like Disney where it's like they may be flooded with guests, just like they see them on stage and they're like a celebrity on board. So it's just...
That's it. And I've had friends who worked for Norwegian Holland Princess, and you are encouraged to fraternize with the guests. Like, hey, if they're going out gambling, go ahead and let them buy you a few drinks and like play cards with them. We want that atmosphere. And on Disney, it's the guest is sort of the star of the show. So we're not going to do anything to get in their way. And as an actor, there was nothing wrong with them seeing you around the ship. Like you didn't have to stay behind the shadows or anything, but they definitely wanted you to not fraternize with the guests. You could go on top deck, sun yourself, read a book, but we don't want Buzz Lightyear talking to guests too much.
Right. When it came to ports, did you guys get privileges to go ashore at every port, or did you have to rotate your schedules?
90% of the time, it was a free-for-all, so you could just get out anywhere. Later in Miami is like the busiest cruise ship port in the United States. They have very strict regulations in port. And so for that contract, about half of it was rotational.
Gotcha.
So
How many contracts did you do?
I did one in Western Mexico, one Northeast Canada out of Manhattan and the Bahamas, and then one Alaska, and then one California coast and Hawaii.
Right on. So you got to see a lot.
I sure did. I loved seeing everything and getting paid to see everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the exchange rate of like all the craziness of living on board and the laundry and the uniqueness of that.
Yes.
The trade-off is when you get those feelings walking into these beautiful destinations, knowing you're not paying like everybody else to go there.
Yeah.
You're being paid to be there.
Yeah. And being in a place like I could have gone the rest of my life with never going to the Bahamas. There's no real draw for me, but
The t-shirts.
being in Key West certainly was a treat, and doing Alaska, I mean, I would pay for that trip again.
Yep.
It's so beautiful.
There's people from New Zealand and Australia who are like, this is par with things we see. From what I've heard,
Wow.
Alaska was gorgeous.
It really is, and they have such strict laws about cruise ships going through the inner passage about volume. Like, you can't play loud music on top because we have caribou and deer, and like they cannot be disturbed. And so it's lovely as a passenger just being on the top deck. You can just hear the glide of the cruise ship going through the still water and look at the wildlife. And when you get off the port, there's not all these hawkers being like, buy my stuff. It's very quiet when you
Right.
get off in port too. And it's on American territory, so your cell phone works, your debit card works. It's just beautiful.
Yeah. Now, when you were out there, were you single?
Yes.
What's it like being a single man out at sea?
Well,
The lone sailor.
lone sailor. I will say, if you are young and single, the opportunity for romantic interludes are infinite because everyone else is young and single. And so, I was, several like short-term girlfriends, I guess.
At the same time, or were they?
Yeah, so and a contract would end, and with some people, we were like, let's keep doing this from afar, and we'll see where it goes, and it would fizzle out. That'd be okay. And then some people, when the contract would end, we'd be like, well, see you later. I like you a lot, but you're going here and I'm going here. So there was never anything messy. It was cool, and everyone's so discreet too. It was like, if you're just hooking up, nobody wants the rest of the ship to know your business. And if you're dating, it's great because you're one of, just a few like out in the open couples. And so you're kind of like one of the stars of the ship.
Oh, they coupled up.
That's right.
And it can
Yeah,
change
yeah.
day to day. I'm
That's
like,
right.
The new couple. Oh, they split up. She's free. Was there a signal for hooking up, and like, where did that happen at the crew bar, or was it like a wink or a like it's on?
No, for me, it was always just like, let's talk after work in the officer's bar. And then like, I was always very straightforward. Like, hey, do you want to come back to my cabin? And,
Circle yes, no, or maybe.
I had one good friend who I asked early on in knowing her. She's very attractive. And she was like, I have a long-term boyfriend and I'm not going to do that. You are very cute and I need to tell you that. And if I were single, I would sleep with you, but I'm not going to, but I will be your friend. And I was like, I appreciate that so very
I
much.
respect that answer.
I really did. Yeah. Yeah. And the officers bar. So let me just paint this picture for you. The crew bar first. 90% of everyone on board is crew. 10% is officers. Crew bar is low ceiling, sticky floor, bright lights like a disco.
Yeah.
With music that's so loud you have to yell into the ear canal of the person next to you to be heard. In the officers bar, just 30, 40 feet away, maybe there's some nice classical music playing. There's a wood bar. It's a tavern. It's a gentleman's tavern.
Yeah.
It's co-ed, obviously. And it's carpeted, and you can hear each other talk.
A little more
Nice,
dignified.
quiet conversations. It was very refined. Yes, I loved the officers bar.
What's some of the craziest things you saw at the crew bar?
Oh, I mean, it's like people having sex with their clothes on. Like,
Crew bar's Amsterdam.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Now, I don't mean that literally, but he is twerking, and then his boyfriend's just like right up against him, and it just, if you didn't look twice, you might think they're having sex. Like, just everyone's grinding on each other, because everyone's 20.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, let's get drunk and get close, yeah. And like, I was 29, and even when I was 20, it wasn't my scene. But at almost 30, I was like, absolutely not.
I don't twerk. I'm 30 now.
I don't twerk. I'm 30. I go to work, but I don't twerk.
So, Danny, what's some of the wildest stuff you saw out at sea?
One time when we were in the Caribbean, I imagine back on our way to Miami, there was a Cuban, a caravan, a flotilla maybe, of Cuban refugees who made that very dangerous journey on lifeboats, on rafts from Cuba trying to get to the United States. Now, the way that refugee law works, I believe, is if you make it to American shore, you can claim asylum. And you can say, I'm, under an oppressive communist government, so I can claim asylum here. But what the United States does is if there are refugees who are making that trip and you intercept them, all vessels have a responsibility to escort those folks to the Coast Guard, who then take them back to Cuba.
Oof.
And, the Castros didn't like people trying to run from their government. So I think about that often, that did they receive punishment for trying to leave?
Yeah, what were the consequences when they got back?
Right, and for me, I'm these people are under an authoritarian dictatorship. We should be helping them get over to the United States if they really want to come. And they were put into, because Disney didn't have, most cruise ships don't. Disney didn't have a brig. They had the only space that was available really was the morgue. Every cruise ship has a morgue. Usually there's no bodies in there. It's a very rare occasion that someone dies. And so they were put in the morgue as the holding cell. And then we just kind of stayed in the water, stopped our trip. And then about an hour later, Coast Guard ship, zoop, came by, and they walked from the bottom decks of our ship onto the Coast Guard ship, and then they were gone. It was wild.
Yeah, it's wild to see. It's so funny. Your story is very similar to a previous interview, where almost verbatim. It's kind of what this last guest expressed, of seeing something like that just out there in the middle of nowhere. This bold attempt to make a move, and then the responsibility and the laws to do exactly that.
I know, and I know that most captains, because a lot of captains I've worked with, every captain I've worked with has not been a United States born citizen. They're Argentinian, Croatian, English. I know in their heart they would like these people to make it to the United States.
Right.
But they're mandated, like you said, by sea law that they have to intercept them.
Yep.
It was, the last night of a cruise, and I was, where was I going? Oh, I remember. So on cruise ships, you have the guest staircases, which are just plain for anyone to see. And then there are crew staircases, which are behind closed doors, just because they're not meant for guest use. There's nothing secretive about them, but they just want to keep the eyesores kind of out of sight.
Yeah, it's less aesthetically pleasing for sure.
Yeah. And so
They're hard to fall down as well.
Yes.
Few bruises on these hips.
Yes. I opened the door to get into the crew staircase, and there was a man and a woman who were dressed from the waist up, but not from the waist down, against a wall. And I froze. I did not know what to do. And they said, he said, please don't tell my wife. And I was like, I don't know who you are. I don't know who your wife is, but dead giveaway, she's not it. And, they were drunk. And so I had to call security.
Oh, no.
So after that, not my responsibility, but yeah, he and that lady had to be taken down to security.
His sister-in-law.
Candace? I don't know. So that was on deck 4. So that became code after a while between a lot of the entertainment crew, men and women, being like, so I had a deck 4 with Jeff last night.
We got a deck 4 on. Awesome.
So then the joke
What's
became...
a deck 4?
Because deck 5 was like the open air crew deck. So then the joke became, who wants to have a deck 4 on deck 5, huh?
Awesome.
You go through some rough waters, as you know. I mean, physically, literally rough waters. And the roughest that we ever had it was always coming back to Los Angeles from Mexico in the Pacific. And there was a performance of a show, and the tilting was very severe. Very severe. We were going up and then crashing down, and going up and crashing down. And we were doing I don't remember what the show was, but I remember I'm very tough when it comes to rocking boats. I'm like Man of Steel, and this one broke me. Like, we were going up and down, and I'm calling the show, and these poor actors are doing la la la, whoa, whoa, and they're just sliding everywhere. And I'm still trying to call the show. We cut a lot of the technical elements, like, okay, no trap doors, no sliding sets, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember I had my little ship phone. They're called wave phones, where you can dial other people who have a wave phone, and the reception is all based around the ship, so you don't need like a cell signal. I was calling the show, and I was like,
oh no,
stand by light 39, and then I got up my wave phone and called my buddy, who was the entertainment host, and I was like, I need you to bring me a paper bag right now, and then I hung up, and God bless him, about 30 seconds later, he bursts in like the Kool-Aid man. He goes, I got you, man. You just puke, buddy. And so I muted my headset. Whoa, whoa.
And then back to show.
And then back to show.
This show must go on. That's incredible and horrific. And it always amazes me, like, knowing theater and that background a little bit, like in general, watching performers perform, especially live theater, just the number of things that can go wrong, no redos, no retakes, and the lifts, the kicks, all the dance moves, the choreography, they're doing all of that with a moving, floating ship. And then seas like that, they're still going.
Yeah.
And on top of that, most theater audiences, you can almost trust they're not going to come in snickered, but like, this is a cruise ship. And obviously you have a lot of kids on yours, but still there's parents like, go play, Timmy. Right. Mama's going to have
Yeah, right.
So with guests coming into your shows, was there any unique guest experiences while in the theater and that you had to stop a show or?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, knock on wood, I'm counting my blessings. I never had any negative guest experiences during shows. If somebody wanted to leave, they just left. We had a really good crew of entertainment hosts who were the ushers, and they were very responsive to if there was anything that was a problem. And, the only problems were not problems at all. It was like, hey, I'm saving 12 seats for my family on a full show. And then the entertainment group would be like, you really can't do that. We got to move in the middle.
What's one of the craziest guest experiences you ever had?
I got to think about this. I know that Lord knows I had them. What about you?
It's just a plethora of unique, and I think as a cruise director, far more encounters, and like I talked about earlier, like sometimes taking that I-95 versus the main strip. I mean, I'd go, taking off a show to running to a game and being there to greet people who I just said farewell to. Then they're like, how'd you do that? But if I would have gone through guest quarters, I'm stopped at every turn to be like, hey, love the show. Hey, got some notes on the show. They've
That's
really
right.
gone downhill. It's like, okay. You know, they cannot wait to give their opinion to the cruise director. Mostly bad. And then
Of course.
sometimes good. Most it's their notes from people who've been sailing for a while. But I
Yeah.
mean, the demographic can be different as well. Like you mentioned the morgue, but like we had some bodies in ours because our demographic was like 60 to
man,
death.
that's right.
So it wasn't uncommon for like, you know, the code to go ringing through like whatever it was.
Yeah.
We got one on our hands.
Wow. I mean, there are worse places to go.
100%. And, you know, a previous guest was like, I'm not going to a nursing home when it's retirement time. I'm going to a cruise ship. I'm going to go retire and cruise and die.
Heck, yeah.
It's cheaper. The entertainment's better.
Staff is friendlier.
Yeah, can be. So the unique thing about Disney, I always hear this, you know, sometimes talking to Disney friends and stuff like that, the glitter front. Disney versus like taking a break, the gate shuts, and it's like, duh, taking off the tiara. The same thing with cruise life. How did you find that balance and contrast of...
I gotta say, I loved, like, there was never a time when the door closed and I was like, oh, wow, these freaking guests, man. So when I worked at the park, it was very different because I had no guest interaction. I was just backstage and I was in a bad place. And, you know, the crew is all salty and stuff too. On the ship, you are living that Disney magic day to day. And I gotta say, I drank the Kool-Aid and I continue to drink it. That's why I loved going through guest areas, because like a lot of the guests are it's their first Disney cruise. Maybe they saved up for like 3 years for this. It's a kid's first time. And I loved it. And that radiates throughout the ship. Even the waiters and the cooks who have, you know, just god awful hours, who put in their all. When somebody comes up to them and says, hey, can you take a picture? It's never like yeah, sure. It's, of course. Hey, can you get in a little closer? Like, honest to God, I loved making memories. I just adored it.
It gave you a sense of purpose.
It did. Oh, it totally did. It was like, oh, this is why we're providing the service, because it really makes people happy.
And it sounds so cheesy, but it's like, it really is a thing.
Oh, entirely. Absolutely. Like, there was, you know, that's why I say I had very few bad guest experiences, because most of the guests were just delighted to be there, and we were so happy to have them.
Yeah.
And also, like, I gotta say, for, you know, Disney Cruise Line management, I had one bad cruise director, but I had 7 terrific cruise directors.
What do you think makes a good cruise director?
Anyone can be like, hi, everybody, how you doing? Good to see you. It's the backstage stuff. It's the how you deal with humans who report to you. How do you keep them feeling valued and inspired and a part of the team? Those are the things that matter. And I had 7 people who, you know, listened to you when you had a concern, who, I don't know, did things like knew it was your birthday, who said, hey, let's do a team building event, one that you guys want to do. Someone who gives you new opportunities. Oh, you want to do this even though it's not your job? You want to try it? Cool. I support you. Great. Let's try it. Men, women, across the board, really good.
Cool. And tell me about that nightmare.
Somebody who started out, you know, in the proverbial mailroom and just worked their way up and was never very good at their job. Morale was always at a low when this person was on board. This person was like, oh, and they always added matinees. Like, that was their solution for everything. Was like, oh, we have a full ship, add a matinee. Now, when there were full ships with other cruise directors, they didn't do that. They were like, you know, let's find other things to do. And like, it's okay. The guests can live without something to do every single second. It's okay. And, you know, the performers were doing, you know, 3 shows a day, and those shows aren't easy. The techs are doing 3 shows a day, and now the entertainment staff is ushering 3 shows a day. And what's it called?
These are sea days, right? Because when you're at a port of call, you're not doing this many shows a day.
No, even at a port of call, yeah. Because if you were doing a port of call and you left at say 5, your first show would be at like maybe 6, and the next show would be at like 7:30. And so
And then a 9.
even
Okay.
when you were in port of call and everyone's off the ship, he would still be like, "We're adding a 2 o'clock show," and you're like, oh, "Man,
No, man. Again, another contrast because one of the previous guests I had was a performer. He was talking about what a cake job he had with some other cruise lines that were not kid based, and I think he did 2 shows a week, 3 shows a week.
Oh my gosh,
It was just like
that's cake."
cake.
Yeah.
So the difference in scale of what actual work and performance is requiring of these performers and stage
Yes.
managers in various roles, it's pretty unique.
And also, having said that, other cruise directors would really collaborate with their assistant cruise directors. They were like one unit. And this guy was like, I remember one time, me and the technical production manager were having dinner with him, and he says, I don't know where this even came from, but he says to the technical manager, "You're a technical manager. That's what you're good at. Manage, and that's where it stops for you. You know how to manage technical." And he turns to me, he goes, "You're a stage manager. That's what you're good at. You manage the stage stuff, and that's where it stops for you. I'm a manager all the way around. That's what I'm good at." And of course, me and the TPM were both thinking, "You're the worst manager on board the ship, and you're suffering from terrible Dunning-Kruger effect."
Awesome. It's a role that's either just done really right or it's done really wrong.
Yeah.
It can be a control position or such
Yeah.
a giving, inspiring position.
I had such a giving, inspiring cruise director. He was a former dancer who became a stage manager, who then became a cruise director. So he knew entertainment inside and out.
Yeah.
And he was, I don't know, he was like your tough basketball coach who really pushed you, but man, did he believe in you. And he supported you every step of the way. From the actors all the way up, he knew what it was like to be on stage on rough sea days. He knew what it was like to be a stage manager. Great person to work for.
Great.
Yeah.
Who got fired?
Our biggest firing was a surprise operation with Coast Guard. It was like 60 people on one day. It was a huge chunk of housekeeping. And it wasn't that the housekeepers were stealing anything, but there was some kind of operation going on between a few housekeepers. And
What kind of operation?
Could have been drugs. I don't stake my identity on it. But certainly something was found, and it was found that this person implicated that person. And I guess it had been going on for a while because we got into port and it was like, whoop, there's the Coast Guard, and whoop, 60 people go off.
60 people gone.
Yeah.
Who is going to fold those animal towels?
Those were the best.
Stage manager, we're going to need you.
Okay. We had one performer get fired, and he was an actor in the main stage shows, and God, he was a really nice guy, but he was just not equipped emotionally to be on a ship. Again, it's a much different lifestyle, and by the time that we got onto the ship, after he finished, so on Disney, they rehearsed for 2 months in Toronto first, and then you board the ship. By the time that his 2 months had wrapped up, he was already on the 3rd of 5 warnings.
Ooh.
Before you're fired.
What was he getting warned for?
Just for being late, just not showing up on time. And he might just have the composition where, some people just really don't function before 9 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
Like, their circadian rhythm is different from mine. And so when he got on the ship, he was already on this thing called a W-1. Then there's a W-2, and then there is dismissal.
It's not a tax form.
It is not. And it was Pirate Night, which is the show on the top deck. And I was in the booth, and I was like, okay, all actors to the dressing room and sign up and report. And so while they're getting ready, I'm stage managing like a little pirate party. But it's very simple. It's like, start the pirate show, and then I don't call any cues. I'm just sort of watching out. And so I'm talking to the people down in the dressing room who say, hey, we're all clear. We're coming up. Okay,
Yeah.
great. And instead I hear, hey, I'll call him Jeff. Jeff's not here yet. And I said, okay, we'll give it another 5 minutes. And there's a very small window of time. And they said, hey, Jeff's still not here. And I said, well, okay, well then swing, you're suiting up. You're going to play the pirate tonight. And, a no call, no show is not good. And so the pirates are headed up, and then I got a call. He's here. I'm like, okay, fine. And I, truth to tell, can't remember if he did the show or not. I just know that he was very late. So the show ends, and my cruise director at that time happened to be the guy I was speaking about earlier, who has done the whole pantheon of things. And he and I go together. No, he says, I need to go down to this guy's cabin. I got to talk to him. And I go, okay, great. So we go down together. Picture like the Commish or Kojak. Like, that's who this guy is. He's a dancer, so he's, ripped.
Yeah.
Big bald head.
Okay.
And very intimidating. And so we go down to this guy's cabin, we knock on the door. All the other actors' heads, by the way, are like peeking out around the corner. I'm like,
Drama. We're here for it.
yeah. So he opens the door, and he is red-faced and teary-eyed, and you can see he's been really going through it. And he says to the guy, to my cruise director, he goes, you're gonna fire me, aren't you? You're gonna fire me. I really messed up. I'm so sorry. You're gonna fire me.
Poor guy.
And my guy says to him, hey, look at me. And by the way, there's like, the actor has hair of his own head in his hands. So he's been like literally pulling his hair out.
I thought he was bald.
No. My cruise director is bald. Yeah. He's Kojak. The actor's a rail. And my cruise director says, hey, listen to me. I am not going to fire you. You messed up. But I want you to search inside yourself and see if this is really what you want to do. I don't want to have to fire you, but if you need to leave, I will support your choice to do that. But if you want to stay, you really got to know that you want to stay. If you leave now, no harm, no foul, we will rehire you when you're ready. But I am not firing you. You have the next 2 days off. And he closed the door, and on our way up the stairs back to our offices, my cruise director turns to me. He says, I am firing him tomorrow. And I said, why? You just said you were going to fire that guy. And he said, look at what he did to himself when he thought he might get fired. What could he do to other people if he thinks he's going to get fired? What could he do to someone if I told him he was going to get fired? He's posing a safety to his fellow cast members on this ship, and that's not something that I can allow. So I had to tell him he wasn't going to be fired, but he needs to get off the ship immediately. And I was like, you are genius. And so the next day we were going to fire him. And, it's time for all aboard. And must not have been aboard because it's like, Jeff, please report to the crew office. Jeff so-and-so. And like, I can see that, the people are like taking up the dock and everything. And we're good to go soon. Well, it turns out he was so upset by the events of the night before that he went into Cabo San Lucas and he had a lot of alcohol. So much alcohol that he forgot that on Thursdays we leave at 2:00, not at 5:00. And so he just missed the boat.
No.
And so we sailed off without him. So, his firing sort of took care of itself.
Jeff! So he's just drunk on land, waving.
Yeah, and then he shows
goodbye.
up to the port, and there's the port agent who has his passport. And, they got a plane ride home for him. And they said, meet us in San Pedro to get your stuff back.
When it's that time, they just don't mess around. Like, it's...
No,
here
they
you
have
go.
a schedule. They have a schedule. And, for every hour that you're in port, that costs the company many tens of thousands of dollars. So they can't wait an extra couple of hours for you. They got to get going. They have a swing who can do your job that night.
Yep.
Yeah.
When you say someone like Jeff going through it,
Yeah.
what do you think that means? What's going through it like Jeff was on a...
He missed his wife. Because of his condition where he just either crippling anxiety or whatever he was not able to show up on time, then it causes this spiral, right? Of like, I can't show up on time and then I feel bad about it. And now I feel bad, so I don't want to get up. And it just keeps you from doing what you got to do. And so he just feels he's depressed, he's anxious, he's lonely. And that's not a good feeling to have. No job is worth that.
Right.
No money is worth that.
And Jeff's probably out there coping with all those feelings with just like,
Yeah,
I was going
right.
to drink it away for a minute.
Right. And so, like, you know, I certainly didn't want him to try to finish the contract if he was going to be so miserable. So he ended up going back to land. And as it happens, I saw him in a regional production later, and he was so good. He's such a good performer, but he's meant for that land life.
That's great.
Yeah.
Did you see out there a lot of that going through itness? Because I mean, the ship life can be a party life in general when it's time to clock out. Because, like you said, you put in so many hours that it's just like, what's there to do out there at sea for a lot of people? That their option is like, let's get hammered, let's have some fun, and then that balance of just like coping with alcohol that just like hangover to drunk to hangover to.
We had one person who really was, again, a really great person, but she was dealing with an alcoholic problem. And she really tried to fight through it, but she was having a problem. And then she ended up getting fired like the last week of the contract. Nobody else really was like coping with alcohol, luckily. All the, you know, the young kids, 21, 22, you know, they went to the bar every night and they got sloshed, but like they were fine the next day. They're 22. We had one guy, actually, I can't believe I didn't talk about this before. Let's call him Freddie. Freddie from Alabama.
Alabama Freddie. He went out with his buddies and then got back on board, and he had a lot to drink, and I was stage managing the show, and there's a part where he handles pyro, and, you know, he handles this big, like, torch that ignites and stuff, and he's, you know, it's around other people's faces and stuff. Dance captain is in the booth with me watching, and he goes, Freddie's drunk. And because, you know, I'm watching the stage, but also my book and the automation guys, everything else, I'm not looking just at the stage. Dance captain's just looking at the stage, and he's like, he's slurring his words. He's sort of moving around unsteadily and with fire.
With fire.
Come on, Freddie.
And this was like my first week with this cast. And he's Alabama good old boy, and he's a dancer first. So he's just like, Tarzan. And I had to walk in there, you know, tiny Jewish guy who I don't know this guy. And I go, you're benched for the second show. And he goes, you're going to bench me? I don't think so. And I said, man, you're benched. That's it. You look drunk. Whether or not you are, we will decide at the security office. But you look drunk to me. So we went down to the security office. It had been like, we had to do the second show. So there was another hour and a half that passed. By the time we got down to security office, breath didn't smell like alcohol. He could walk a straight line. His eyes weren't red anymore. And that's when security told me, well, to confirm if someone's drunk, you have to have another senior officer confirm it at the time. And I was like, that would have been really helpful to know before I started my contract. Because then it was this cancer that grew in the cast where he did a show drunk with pyro and faced zero consequences. And then I had to be on people about regulation sock length and be like, you get a verbal warning because your socks are too short. And they're like, Freddie did a show drunk and I get the sock thing.
Yeah.
And I had to have a big, like, come to Jesus meeting with the whole cast because it became very corrosive. And I had to be like, we are a team. We cannot throw each other under the bus like this. You have to show up for each other. Mm-hmm. And my cruise director at that time said, I'm not going to make him apologize. I want him to make the choice to apologize to his cast. He never did. And so that cancer just grew over the entire length of the contract. And then you had two camps, people who supported Freddie and people who thought Freddie was a schmuck. And that never recovered.
Wow.
Yeah.
Freddie's a schmuck dichotomy.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah. That's fun. So Danny, what was the absolute best part of cruising for you in summary?
The best part, it got me to where I am now. So I told you that when I was working at the Aladdin show, I was a stage manager who just wanted to be a performer. It was very painful. So on the ship, that remained true. I was in a different place, but my juxtaposition was the same. I wanted to be a performer, but I was performer adjacent, and I was watching all these other people do it, and it was killing me. And there's one show on the ship called the Golden Mickeys, which is all live Disney shows are a very thin plot to get to one hit song to the next hit song, and so on and so on. And this one was about like an awards show on the ship, and the main character was a stage manager who secretly inside just wants to be a performer. And then at the end of the show, there's no one left to do a number, and she gets up and she becomes a performer, and all of her dreams come true. She steps through the fear to do the thing that she wants to do. Well, I'm up in the booth, and I'm stage managing the show. So every night at the very end, this tear comes out of my eyeball that I have to suck back into my head and be like, keep it together. And finally, about a year and a half in, I just could not take it anymore. And I took my headset off, threw it against the wall. As soon as the show was over, I walked out. I walked in my boss's office, and this cruise director was also great. And I said, I can't do this anymore. The next port that we get into, I am leaving to become a full-time performer. And he was this big, jolly, gay South African man. And he said, yes, do it, live your life. And we deported in Los Angeles. And I said, that's it. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I got to go be a professional performer. And a couple days later, I opened up a copy of Backstage, and they were auditioning for Ali Hackham in Oklahoma at this theater in NorCal. And I hadn't sent in a video or I hadn't auditioned in 10 years. And I sent in the video, I sent it in, and the next day they said, we open in 2 weeks. Can you be here tomorrow? So that was the best thing that came out of cruise ships.
Yep. Amazing. You played several roles since then, including a pirate. What do you think is one of the, maybe not worst, but lessons learned from your time at sea?
I don't like being a corporate manager. I learned that because you are not only the stage manager, you're also the company manager. And you're not dealing with just company management like you're used to on a tour or a Broadway show. You're also a big C company manager. And I learned that it's my job to reinforce these company standards that I think don't make a difference. But I have to come down on somebody who's a good friend of mine and cause this tension between us for something I don't even believe in. And I read all kinds of books on it and took trainings on it. And I just said, this is not in my blood. I cannot have folks live up to company standards that don't make any sense to me.
Yeah. What do you wish were different with the cruise industry?
Oh, gosh. Well, that's a great question. I wish internet were free. Again, not a big deal for me. I'm in American ports all the time. But for the folks from the Philippines, from China, from Indonesia, from India, they have a much harder time. And they usually have wives, husbands, children. And like, I got paid $1,200 a week. They maybe got paid $400. So like, if you're not going to pay them that well, you ought to make sure they can talk to their families for free.
Yep. What do you wish more people knew about cruising?
Oh, what do you wish more people knew about cruising?
It is a good question. Huh. I think I wish more people knew these conversations, and that when they find the housekeeping staff, the bar staff, and even the coddled entertainment staff and some of the upper 10%, like you're speaking of, how long these contracts are, and have just an empathy walking in to, everybody signed up for this, knowing what they're getting into to be employed on a cruise line, but just a bit more graciousness with all of that staff and appreciation as they went along for kind of one of the coolest experiences out there for people.
I would like to reframe the conversation about cruise ship entertainment. When you do a Broadway show, you do it 8 times a week. But you do the same show, you do the same one show, and your theater is parked on a foundation. When you do a cruise ship show, at least on Disney, you would be doing, 10, 11, sometimes 12 shows a week. And those are 3 or 4 different shows.
Right.
And the stage is moving. And you can't go out and get TGI Fridays afterward with the cast. This thing about like it's only cruise ship entertainment, I want to reframe that as like, oh, it's only Broadway. It's not cruise ship. Like cruise ship is like expert pro level because you got to work so much harder. And if somebody goes down, like with this pandemic, when somebody went down out of Come From Away, somebody from Hadestown who had done the show already was available. When somebody goes down on a cruise ship, you have a finite number of human beings. And so sometimes, you're down 4 people and now you're doing split tracks. Now Danny is doing Jeff and Jennifer and Danny's track all at the same time. And there's no choreographer or director on board to teach that. It is a much harder maze to navigate than a Broadway show.
And they adjust on the fly, sometimes 5 minutes before going on with a last minute hiccup.
We had a male swing who had to learn the onstage female swings track in about 20 minutes. Luckily, he was also the dance captain, so like he was able to compute it, but like that's something that's very difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's something from your time out at sea that you'd never want to tell your mother?
I mean, oh gosh. Probably how much I gambled at Atlantis. Now, it was, granted, only $80, but like she would still be like, you're throwing your money away.
So other than your gambling addiction, what were ways you spent your money? Because out there, you're kind of just stockpiling that money with no real expenses.
Heck yeah.
While you were out there, what were you blowing your money on?
Not much. I'll tell you what I did. In my first contract, I set up a Fidelity long-term stocks and bonds account. So you could divert up to 50% of your weekly paycheck to your long-term savings. And I said, yes, thank you. So I was making $1,200 a week and $600 of it went to long-term savings. And 2012 and 2013 were very good years. And so I was blowing my money on long-term future, baby.
Wow. He's a baller. I think that's a rarity. I think your choice is a little bit more rare. A wise one. Well done, but like definitely the rarity. That's funny. Did you ever have any family friends come cruise with you, and how was that like? What did your family think about all this?
Oh, they loved it. My mom liked it because it seemed like a lot of fun. My dad liked it because he's like, oh, this seems like a stable job. And so, yeah, I actually had the opportunity to have my mom and dad, my sister, and her little kids on board. It was great to have 3 little kids on a Disney cruise line. And they thought that I was the captain, because they were so little. They were like 5 or 6. And then they were like, who drives the boat? And I was like, I drive the boat. They're like, wow. That was great. I had friends from New York, friends from California. That was a piece of advice I got from the cruise director who hired me. I said, what should I know about this job? And he said, get as many people on board as you can. You never know how long you'll have this job, and you have the ability to sign on 16 guests per contract. He's like, that's almost a guest a week, man.
Wow.
And take advantage of it. And so I heeded his advice.
That's great.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you do differently now, looking back with your time?
I would go back as a performer.
Would you go back? If I had a contract for you right now that was just like, I'll give you $2,000 a week.
Nah.
No.
I love the life, but when I'm running this company, I just can't afford to be gone with maybe Wi-Fi for 4 or 5 months. Not worth it.
Right.
After I finished as a stage manager, though, I went back as a guest entertainer.
Oh.
And that was the shiz.
Okay, I need to hear about this.
So on my way out, before I dramatically leapt off the ship, I said, by the way, a lot of the guest entertainers that you have are sort of over it, and I don't think they're delivering great quality shows. So I pitched my improv troupe, and about a month later, I got a call, and they said, we would like to try you out. So for about 3 years, we would do a week on, a month off, a week on, a month off, and that was great. I could do that forever.
How do guest entertainers get treated?
Like kings, my friend. You do either 4 days or 5 days. If you're a single guest entertainer, you are making bajillions of dollars. We split ours 5 ways, and it's still great. Like I think it's 3,000 for 3 days and less, 4,000 for 4 to 7 days, and you stay in a guest cabin. We often stayed in 2 or 3 guest cabins because there were 5 of us. They had no idea that we would have been like, we'll be happy to all share one twin bed. Like, we feel so privileged to be here. You dine in the guest dining areas. You have, a 5-course meal every night, and you do 2 shows. And the rest of the time you play shuffleboard and go in the pool.
And you stay away from those blackjack tables in Atlantis.
Yes.
Very cool. So I think it's been so fun talking with you and getting so many of these stories. Is there anything you wished I would have asked you?
No, I don't think so. I think we talked quite thoroughly.
Where do we need to travel to?
I'm so glad you asked. Alaska, number 1 on the list. Number 2, Key West. Key West is great because it feels like you're in the Caribbean, but you're on American soil. So your cell phone works, your cash dollars work, everyone speaks the same language as you. It's beautiful. If you want a cruise where there's not going to be a lot of kids on board, which I think is great, the trip to St. John and Halifax, do it if you can. It's also very discounted because it's not the Bahamas. It's not the Caribbean. It's great.
Right on.
Yeah.
And one final question I ask all my guests. So for this entire journey of life, what do we need to enjoy this journey?
Enjoy your friends. If someone invites you somewhere and you have the mental energy to go, yeah.
Here's to the good ships, the wood ships, and all the ships that sail the sea. But the best ships are the friendships. So may they always be.
That's it. That's it.
I said that far too many times. with those raised champagne glasses for some donations and continued
that's right.
sailing to invite him back. Yeah. Well, Danny, thank you so very, very much for sharing time with me today.
Of course.
Glad to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of our Wild Stories at Sea. If you have any crazy endeavors out on the Big Blue, email me at cruisedirectortyler@gmail.com. That's cruisedirectortyler@gmail.com. We would love to hear your stories, either on board or from the crew